now, and I'll get the YouTube link for you. Hey guys, welcome to, of course, the stream. I'm just getting the link all put together here. All right, here's the YouTube link. That's in the comment section, and we also have the StreamYard link in the comment section. We're not going to invite guests into here now. That'll probably be later, guys. So those are the two links if anybody needs to send them. But yes, so I suppose we'll wait a second for people to kind of filter in. How's your morning or afternoon going?
It's good. How's yours, man? Thank you for having me on, bro.
Of course. Thank you for accepting the invitation. I'm glad we could organize this.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And last night's stream was pretty fun. You were there for, I think, the last 45 minutes. It was a good
discussion. It was fun. I agree. I think we've corresponded before on Discord or somewhere. I can't remember.
Yes, we spoke on Discord like over a year and a half ago. I was on the Lion's Den server kind of semi-actively. And then, of course, we spoke on Instagram, Twitter, and a couple other places.
Okay. Got it.
We have Basilios says, it's always nice to see you, Daniel.
Thank you, Basilios.
I know this guy. Hi, Daniel and Jim. Great to see you here.
Thank you, Qudus. Glad to have you guys on.
So now that we've got a little bit of an audience filtering in, why don't you give an introduction to who you are, what is kind of the basics of your role and Oriental Orthodoxy?
Sure. So I am Daniel Kakish. I'm a subdeacon in the Syriac Orthodox Church, Western Archdiocese, under His Eminence Mor Qalimis Augin Kaplan, Patriarchal Vicar of His Holiness Mor Ephraim II, Patriarch of Antioch. And I became Orthodox Holy Saturday of 2013. I was chrismated. I was received by chrismation, and I became a subdeacon January 22nd, I think it is, of 2018. So I started I started looking into this kind of stuff. It was 2011, something like that. Elijah Yassi, people know him, and his brother Fawaz goes by Enoch. They introduced me to the church fathers. Back then, I didn't know anything about that, and so once you start, you can't really stop. Like, people think, you come to the answer and then you're good, but no, like, this kind of thing never ends. You die and you're still learning, like, no matter how old you get. So I've been reading and researching and looking into these things ever since. I've always been a history guy, even before this stuff. My first master's is in history from San Diego State University. I have another master's in theology, theological studies from Agora University, which I highly recommend to everyone. It's accredited. And so my thing, though, is whoever knows me would know, my thing is history. I prefer reading the Syriac tradition, like the poems in the Syriac tradition, than I would prefer reading, let's say, philosophy or law. This is kind of my interest or direction of interest. That's a little bit about me and relevant to this kind of context. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you or anyone might have a question about.
Right. Well, I would say beyond, thank you for the personal introduction, first of all. And then for some of my audience are really not that familiar with Oriental Orthodoxy. If you could sum it up in kind of the layman's terms, what is the difference between the Oriental churches and those who call themselves Eastern Orthodox?
Sure. So the Oriental Orthodox Communion, as it's called in the West, is a communion of those churches who follow the faith of the three ecumenical councils, Nicaea, Constantinople, and Ephesus, and continue in that faith and are in communion together and have been from the beginning. in the West, that is our naming convention. In the East, obviously, we don't call ourselves that. This is something for the Westerners to be able to distinguish between the options here. A very recent example of the confusion is the big thing that came out recently. You've probably heard where the Coptic Church said that we're ending theological discussion with Rome after consulting with the other Orthodox churches. The word in Arabic, الكنائس الأرثوذكسية الشرقية. So when you translate it into English, it comes out as Eastern Orthodox churches.
Right.
Because in Arabic, Oriental and Eastern they're the same word.
Even in English, they're kind of the same thing. I mean,
yeah,
very confusing why we have such different titles for them like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the East, the people are not saying EO and OO. You don't find that. There's the Roman Orthodox, which is what we call EO, and then there is like Aqbat al-Orthodox or Syrian al-Orthodox or Ottoman al-Orthodox, like depending on which jurisdiction it is. So yeah, that a difference is that what we call Eastern Orthodox in the West, that those are the churches who accepted the Council of Chalcedon and the following councils after, and who remained in communion with the Bishop of Rome until a certain time. And so this is a very, very like kind of surface level thing. This all has very deep theological implications regarding Christology, the nature of Christ, ecclesiology, all that kind of stuff.
I see. That's a really good intro, and I think the people on my channel who don't know that much about the Oriental churches are going to be able to learn quite a lot here. I wanted to ask, before we get into kind of any depth of theology, there was some kind of a Eastern, again, these terms mainly for English, Eastern and Oriental dialogue in the 1990s, where it looked a little optimistic and promising, but now people say that kind of dialogue is not really over, but it's not going anywhere. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I could see that. So obviously, I just mentioned the one with Rome already, and then there is the ones with the Oriental Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox that ended, or that we haven't heard a peep out of that for like, what has it been, 30 plus years, because of multiple different reasons in different parts of the world. Depending on the jurisdiction, everyone has a different reason for why they didn't continue the dialogue. And the truth is kind of hidden in the statement, the recent Coptic statement with Rome. That's kind of the real answer, which is the implication is that it's based on something incorrect. And the reason I say that is because it says in that statement, we need to step back and reevaluate and reassess the direction of the conversation. Because if you're from the generation of, well, this is all a big misunderstanding, everybody means the same thing,
right?
Then you're kind of starting this in the wrong direction. And then I think now both sides are realizing that the Eastern Orthodox, we're saying, oh, it's a big misunderstanding, we're saying the same thing. Now they're not. Same thing with us. We're also not saying that anymore.
Right.
So, and Rome, Rome probably is still saying that, but we're saying no, it's not the same.
So if I understand, sorry to interrupt, if I understand correctly, in the 1990s, people thought, both on the Greco East side and the Oriental Eastern side, the Oriental Orthodox side, we kind of excuse me, we kind of have the same belief, but we're mixing up the Greek terms. But now that's no longer the case. We realize, no, we've tried to work through that, but we actually do mean something else. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think there was a conference in the winter in New Jersey, and His Eminence Monsiverius Roger Achras of the Syriac Orthodox Church, he said, it's not a misunderstanding. There is a difference in theology here. His Eminence Amba Yusuf of the Coptic Church in the southern states of the U.S. said the same thing multiple times. This is now the conservative trend of why we're separated is back, because maybe it was missing because people maybe forgot or didn't know or haven't read it in a while, but now it's back and they're realizing it. And I think everyone's becoming more aware that this is not a misunderstanding.
I see. What do you? I know that we recently talked about, well, a few minutes ago, you mentioned the dialogue between the Roman Catholic Church and especially with the Coptic authorities. They said, hey, it's seized. We're not doing that anymore because of the disagreements over morality and, of course, theology. What do you think of Rome, specifically the Catholic Church's endeavor in the last maybe 30, 40 years to try to be the unifier of all the apostolic churches? Do you think that they're going to be successful with that, or it's just kind of wasted optimism?
I think it's wasted, because if you have it's Eugene and 3 other brothers, okay, and then you talk things out with one brother at a time, but they are also not reconciled. Right. So even if you reconcile them and you reconcile all 3 of them with yourself, but it doesn't mean they're reconciled with each other. So we're not playing, like, you can't sweep this under the rug. You have to get them all together, all 4 right. together, and they have to all figure it out together. And this is the problem with the Eastern Catholics, because what ends up happening is that you have, for example, the Chaldean Church that has the Church of the East tradition, right, of Nestorius and Theodore and these guys. And then you have the Syriac Catholic Church that has the Severus Jacobaredeus tradition. And then you have the Melkites that have John of Damascus and Maximus and them. So they're all in communion with Rome now. They all have conflicting traditions with each other.
Right.
They don't even think about it because it's all swept under the rug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, with the Melkites, you have kind of the Greek tradition. And then you said the Syriac Catholics originally come from the Oriental Orthodox tradition. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Chaldeans, as you mentioned, Chaldean Eastern Catholic Church comes from the Nestorian, as we would say, tradition. How on earth are they unifying? I mean, how do these work without any conflict? They just kind of pretend.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, oh, we're all in communion with the Pope. Who cares? But they it's kind of self-condemning, because if you think about it, how does the Syriac Catholic Patriarch make any claim to legitimacy? If Severus was illegitimate, then how does the Syriac Catholic Patriarch have legitimacy?
Right.
If Chalcedon was right,
Exactly. So their tradition would basically just be a cultural thing then. It wouldn't
exactly. And the same is true for the Maronites, and the same is true for the Chaldeans. And the same is true for the Coptic Catholics. And there's a big problem that the Eastern Catholics, it's like, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, or whatever. It's like that. It's like that. They just don't want to think or talk about it. They don't want to deal with that. It's like, oh, we're in communion with the Pope. Who cares?
Right. That's a major problem, because, like I said, you're basically turning all the traditions into a cultural hub, but there's no theological substance. So you're essentially saying, in my mind, as a Syriac Catholic, everything the Chaldeans say is basically starting point is heresy. So I don't have to believe in any of their saints, and then likewise, it's crazy.
So the Chaldeans today, if you talk to them, they would tell you, no, it was a misunderstanding, and the proof of that is the recent agreement between Pope John Paul II and Mardincha of the Assyrian Church of the East. So they would say Nestorius was misunderstood. The anathemas are not infallible. That's what the Chaldeans would tell you. Oh, like I had a Chaldean priest tell me recently, young priest. He told me, "I'm not a." Look how he says it too. Like, pay attention to the honorifics here. He says, "I'm not a fan of Saint Cyril, for what he did to Nestorius. So he's saying Saint Cyril, but he's not saying Saint Nestorius,
I see.
but he's on Nestorius' side.
So he's acknowledging this guy's not a saint, but we're still on his side.
Yeah, he openly, all the Chaldeans openly admit that they use the three anaphoras of Nestorius, Diodor, and Theodore, and they venerate them on the calendar as the Greek fathers.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
I remember last night we mentioned that as well. I mentioned how, they'll basically claim Nestorius was not Nestorian. He didn't teach Nestorianism. It's kind of a misnomer. What is your official opinion on that? Are they coping, or is it they have some kind of a truth?
I believe 100% that they are being sincere. Like I don't think they're lying to our face, kind of thing. No, okay. I think they really believe that Nestorius did not teach two sons or two persons, and I would say Nestorius himself believed that he didn't, and he never claimed to. I think that, as it is with all of our apologetics with each other, we view each other as the view that we respectively hold to lead to something that we don't profess, and obviously us being biased to our own sides, don't acknowledge that it leads to that.
Right.
With the Assyrian Church of the East, they would very strongly say that Christ is one person, one son, but then in all like that, okay, if you want to do systematic theology of application regarding scriptural references, or you want to use patristics, or you want to use metaphysics, or all of them together, this is where now we start to have the conversation.
Right.
But then, like, my point is the straw man, the polemical straw man that we each have of each other, nobody admits of himself to believe in that thing. Like you used the example yesterday of Salib saying that the Chalcedonians believe in a tetrad. Obviously, the Chalcedonians would say, no, we don't believe in a tetrad.
Right, of course.
This is an example. Yeah.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you now, because we'll get into the theological component. I was trying to explain the difference between two natures after the union and the one composite nature, because a lot of people misinterpret the Oriental position as Eutychianism, which, if I'm familiar, basically means one nature where you don't have these two elements of divine and man involved. Whereas you guys don't believe that. You still believe there are divine and man elements involved, but it's one composite nature. What's the difference between that and two after the union?
So that's a good question. And for anybody who doesn't know, we anathematize Eutyches. He's condemned as a heretic in our church. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when we're saying one composite nature, so we believe that Christ is a composition from the two in the union, so that we believe the hypostatic union is exactly what it sounds like, a union of two hypostases, divine and human, coming together and becoming one incarnate hypostasis. And we don't use hypostasis to mean person.
I see.
So he is one incarnate hypostasis from the two. He doesn't continue into two. He doesn't have two modes of being. He doesn't exist in two after that union. After that union happens, he's only one.
Okay.
So whereas in the Chalcedonian understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Gene, there's a simple divine hypostasis only, and there's a human properties that belong to the divine hypostasis. He makes them his own, and he has a human ousia, but the properties belong to the divine hypostasis, not to the human ousia.
Yes, without verging into having anything similar to what we would say is Nestorianism, which would be two complete sons. Obviously, we're both against that. So I suppose my question would be, in your belief in this one composite theology, are there certain actions that Christ does according to the human nature compared to the divine nature? How do you separate those kind of abilities or actions that he performs in the gospel?
So Saint Mark, the monk, who's canonized by all of us, I think, Saint Mark the monk, he says very clearly in his work against Nestorius, he says, we can't say his flesh did this or his flesh did that. We can say he did this in the flesh. Christ did this in the flesh. God did this in the flesh.
Okay.
So when we're talking about whatever example there is in the scripture, this is the way and this is the lens in which we're reading it. So according to anathema number 4 of Saint Cyril, and according to anathema, I think it's also number 4 of Saint Gregory, if I remember right. This is the lens by which we are interpreting these passages in the scriptures.
I see. Okay, that actually makes quite a lot of sense. Do you, before we get into more of the historical element, because I know you said that was your strong suit, do you think that there's any potential for some kind of unification? People ask me all the time on my channel, James, what do you think? Are the Orientals going to come into union with us? Are we going to go into union with them? Or is anybody going to come into union with the Roman Catholics? What do you think the next 30 years or 40 years holds?
I think that with the Eastern Orthodox, because I think 2018 was their schism within each other, right? And what is it? Moscow and Constantinople. So I think that
between those two,
yeah. So I think that made it more approachable for conversation. Like, for example, Moscow is very close to the Oriental Orthodox patriarchates. The relations are very good. And conversations have been picking up with Moscow ever since. Everyone's becoming more friendly on that side of things. The Constantinople side of things, not so much.
I see. Well, the Constantinople side looks like they're moving closer
to Rome.
Yeah, to Rome.
Yeah.
And so, because you've had people keep bringing up this dramatic 2025 reunion, which I think is a little overblown, but you can see that
the calendar. That's the reason. Like the 2025, because the calendars coincidentally line up that year. So, so they want to push it to where after this year they're going to stay the same. That's the goal.
Right. And you said specifically in the what we'd call like the Greek arena. So Constantinople, they're closer to the Catholics, and you were saying that Moscow is closer to the Oriental Orthodox. I think particularly they're close to the Ethiopian Church, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, and the Copts. You should see what's going on in Egypt right now with Russia and the Copts. The Greeks are really upset because of the relations with the Russians and the Copts with each other.
Wow, I had no idea about that. Could you give a little more background?
The Copts are like I think they donated a building to the Russians or something, and then in Syria also, the Syrian Orthodox Church and Moscow have very good relations. The Assyrian Church of the East and Moscow, all these Eastern churches, they kind of, Russia has done a good job of establishing kind of fruitful relations with them, that kind of like, let's see what happens going forward when we talk about theological dialogue. I say this all the time. Metropolitan Hilarion, he says that the Oriental Orthodox shouldn't be expected to accept Chalcedon in any form of union. With Constantinople, though, ironically, it's funny because Russia's more hardline on some points.
Right.
They're more seen as the conservatives, and Constantinople kind of to be the liberals. But in this point, Constantinople's the hardline. They're the ones who kind of don't budge on this kind of thing. It's funny. It's funny how that works out.
What do you think the reason for that is? Because from what I've seen from Constantinople, a lot of people accuse them, and it's not just because it's called the ecumenical patriarchate, but they accuse them of being very ecumenical toward Rome. Would they shun the Oriental side? What do you think the reason is?
Really, they're really big on Chalcedon. They're really big on the the Greek tradition, Chalcedonian, the Chalcedonian tradition, the narrative of history, and they don't think it's optional. And I think that's why maybe them and Rome. That's one of the reasons why maybe them and Rome can be close, is because that's always been Rome's position also.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go a little bit into the history. This is going to be maybe not controversial, but a lot of people ask me this question. So when the rise of Islam came, and we had the invasions into the Middle East, there are quite a few people that are polemical in a political way toward the Oriental churches. Claim the Copts and the Jacobites and everybody else openly sided with the Arabian invaders just to spite the Melkites. What is your opinion on this accusation?
The opposite is true. If we read, there's been a lot of scholarship on this. Professor William Penn has a lot on this. Was it William Penn or Michael Penn?
I'm not sure. It might be Michael Penn. Either way.
Yeah, Envisaging Islam, When Christians First Met Muslims. All of these books he has, primary source books. And also there's a lot of Armenian scholarship, a lot of everything that I've seen shows the contrary, that it was kind of the Melkite side that was kind of kissing up to the new invasions, and the Nestorians too, the Church of the East too. The Oriental Orthodox got it the worst out of everybody, and the reason why is because they were the furthest from Islamic Christology. There's no way to hide Oriental Orthodox Christology in a Muslim context, because we can't say his human nature, this or that.
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah, there's no way we can hide it. So we're the highest Christological option. And so because of that, we've always been the least favored of everyone in the area.
I see. What do you think, since we're on this topic, there's two questions I have. The first one is, what do you think of the accusation that Islamic theology is Nestorian? Do you think that's kind of an overgeneralization, or is there some kind of a truth to that?
I think there's some influence. I've heard that there's like influences from multiple sides, but it seems that way. It seems there's some kind of hypostatic confusion there, because in one you probably know the verse that says لما توفيتني, when Christ is telling Allah supposedly that when you allowed me to die, in the past tense. And then another part, لم صلبوه لم صلبوه لم قتلوه, they didn't crucify him or kill him. Well, which one is it? Did he die or did he not? أو شبه لهم, he appeared to. So it seems like there is a confusion there, and I've said this on other things, that I think the confusion exists because there's so much Syriac influence there that they don't know what to make of it. So he appeared to die, it's actually from Saint Ephraim in his commentary on Hebrews chapter 2 verse 9. And they don't know that, where Saint Ephraim is saying he appeared to die because the divinity doesn't die. He died according to the flesh, right?
Right. Exactly.
So they are, the Muslims, when they're getting the kind of the influence of their predecessors in the area, they don't understand what we mean, so that they kind of just make up their meanings after. It's the same thing they did with the huriyat, the virgins. It's not virgins, it's grapes in heaven. Their concept of what paradise looks like, their concept of the kind of where everything is, what paradise is, how Adam and Eve fell, all these kind of stories that got to them. The Syriac influence is very clear in all of them, and they don't know that.
Right. Yeah, the Syriac is definitely by far the largest influence on Islamic poetry, theology, and kind of just the general understanding they have of metaphysics and the afterlife. It's very interesting to look at. So you would say that there is a confusion between the Nestorian Syriac writings and some of maybe the Oriental Orthodox Syriac writings. that they couldn't comprehend the differences there, or
I wouldn't even say it was writings, unless we can
or recitation maybe.
yeah, unless we can kind of find that more. It seems like we haven't yet established it in scholarship, but it seems like for sure recitations or oral tradition have passed down to them that way. Dr. Gabriel Reynolds, who in my opinion might be the greatest scholar, one of the greatest scholars in the world on Islam, he says that the Quran, because we separate the Quran from the later Islamic tradition, right?
Sure.
So the Quran, it's almost a reaction or like an intentional apologetic against pre-existing Christianity, like intentional to give an alternative to Christianity.
I see.
So it's intending to address these issues, and I think there are parts of it that prove that point from him, but I think there are also parts of it that try to be a continuity, and they don't really. It's like someone is trying to do this, but they're kind of missing it. What's your ethnic background, by the way? You Middle Eastern?
Yeah, Lebanese.
Oh, okay, cool.
I did want to ask you, since this is a good topic we're on, and then we'll of course move into another topic afterward. What do you make of people who say that the Oriental Orthodoxy is not really one church? It's just a bunch of churches who have vague similarities. What would be a refutation of that?
That's pretty easy. So I think a study of history would prove the continuity of communion together. The primitive church, if we go to the first, second, third, fourth century, they didn't all have the same rite in every jurisdiction. Every jurisdiction had its own rite, its own tradition, its own canons, and they were in communion based on the faith. So this is what Oriental Orthodoxy is. It's the only model that exists like this today. And like I said, when people tell us the argument, well, you guys didn't call yourselves Oriental Orthodox. Yeah, we didn't. We didn't call ourselves Oriental Orthodox. Again, it's a Western naming convention. What we call ourselves officially is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That's what our official name is. So all of us together, the See of Alexandria in communion with the See of Antioch, in communion with Armenia and the Tewahidos, the Habasha. So this is the Oriental Orthodox communion, what we call in the West. Each has their own rite, canons, tradition, but we're in communion together, full communion. There's nothing we disagree with each other based on the faith.
Got it. Yeah, I always thought that was kind of a strange apologetic for people to take. Like, oh, Coptic Church is not the same as the Syriac Church. Well, historically, they were united in theology, which is essentially what you've said there. For some of the people who might not have been here yesterday, we mentioned the concept of kind of Greek theology and mysticism versus Latin versus Syriac. And you and I agreed that the Syriac East seemed to be more similar to the Latin West than either of them were to the Greek East. Could you maybe explain that in a little more depth for some of the people who didn't hear that yesterday?
Sure. Yeah, I think from what I've seen too, that there are more similarities, I think, between the Latin patristic tradition and the Syriac patristic tradition than either have with the Greeks. Although the style and emphasis are different, the approach is different. Like the Syriac tradition focuses on poetry, on parallels, types. It's more mystical, right? It doesn't try to define the object. It paints the picture around the object because it respects the mystery. Whereas the Latin tradition, it tries to define and intentionally, and it's very legalistic. But the way they arrive to particular understandings of things, because like you implied yesterday, they're both very biblically focused. Especially the Syriacs, I would say, having more of the Semitic influence there, not really translating the philosophers of the Greeks until later. So they kind of didn't have anything else to work with except the Targums and stuff like that.
Right.
So where the Latins were doing it kind of on a legal level, they arrived to very similar conclusions on things. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something that I find very interesting to look at, because the early Latin West was not nearly as philosophical as it would be in the medieval period. People
Mhm.
always say like, "Oh, the Latins are Aristotelian," but they weren't in the first few centuries. So it's interesting to see those parallels between them and the Syriac East. I did want to ask you, now that we're on the topic of the Latin West, what do you think of the format that is used by a lot of Westerners, penal substitutionary atonement? What is the understanding of what Christ did for us on the Oriental side? Because I know that Eastern Orthodox, Catholics, and Protestants argue about it a lot. So what is your opinion on that?
Honestly, bro, like when Eastern Orthodox tell me what they believe about this, I don't disagree with what they're saying. He trampled death by his death. We say it every Sunday.
Yes.
And when Catholics are telling me what they believe about this, I also don't disagree. He did die for our sins in place of us. So I'm not really sure if I'm understanding what the argument is between the two sides. I feel like it is this, like we both are saying the same thing, because both of them in the Syriac tradition are both there. Both views are very much emphasized.
Yeah, that's
That
what I thought.
yeah, he is the substitution for us, and he trampled our death by his death. So I don't know what the conflict is in the conversation.
It's interesting because on the Eastern Orthodox side, I don't know if you could see on social media, there's a lot of internal argument based on that. So there's some Eastern Orthodox that are very comfortable saying stuff like atonement or substitutionary atonement. And then you have some others wildly on the other side who say, no, that's Latin captivity. But clearly you guys don't have any Latin captivity, yet you still agree with the idea of atonement. So I find this accusation that everything's Latin captivity to be a bit of an overreaction personally.
Yeah, it's Romophobia. That's right.
Right. Not everything that Catholics say is wrong just because.
Right, right. I think there was a few other examples of these kinds of issues regarding original sin, ancestral sin, or regarding things about Mary, or purification after death is a big one. I'm a very big proponent that to be Orthodox, you have to believe in purification after death. This is not optional. So I think some people, they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater just to not be like Rome. You know, it's not right.
Exactly. Is there any kind of similarity with that? Like, not with you in particular or the official stance, but are there any maybe minority figures in Oriental Orthodoxy that have tried to say, "Hey, we can't do X, Y, and Z. It's too Hellenic. It's too Greek." Is there any kind of sentiment like that in the Oriental side?
In the Syriac Orthodox Church in particular, because of the size, the ethnic size. So for the non-ethnic part, it's pretty big now, thank God. But for the ethnic part, it's small. So the issue of preserving the identity of kind of the native part of the church, um, it's always feeling like we can't be influenced by. There's three particular um, groups that we're kind of always trying to make sure this is coming from us and we're not being influenced by either the Latins, the Greeks, or the Copts.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we don't want to Coptify. We don't want anyone else to Syriacize either. We want the other Oriental Orthodox sees to keep their stuff, but we also don't want to Hellenize, and we don't want to Latinize too. And so a renaissance is currently taking place in the Syriac Orthodox Church. And there is a movement towards liturgical restoration, bringing back our old stuff, like everything the original way. His Eminence, Morsiverius Roger Akhras, has a series on YouTube in Arabic about the liturgical restoration that the Synod is working on.
That's really fascinating. The reason I brought that up was I was reading a paper. It was by a Coptic priest, and I know this isn't Syriac per se, but he was discussing the idea of over-Hellenization in the Eastern Orthodox Church. And even though he says the word theosis is perfectly acceptable within the Oriental Orthodox, The Coptic Church prefers to use, I think, theopoiesis instead, because they view the language of the Greeks to be too influenced by Hellenic philosophy. Do you agree with that?
No, okay. So it's hard to say it in Arabic. It's harder on the ears. If you say theosis in Arabic, ta'alluh, it's hard. It's like, it's not something that the Arabic mind can kind of define in an orthodox way based on the word outside of any context, just the word by itself. Ta'alluh. So when you say theosis in Greek, I would actually recommend an Arabic speaker to just transliterate it, just saying theosis, like while speaking Arabic. Don't translate it into Arabic. Transliterate it. Leave it in Greek, because when you transliterate it, everybody goes like this. Now, Hellenization. Look, there. I wouldn't. I would say there is some kind of there, because the Eastern Orthodox Church is the remnant of the Roman Empire. That is the imperial church, not the Latins, not the Oriental Orthodox, not the Assyrian Church of the East. The Eastern Orthodox, they are the vestige of the Roman Empire that fell in 1453. So, because of that imperial presence, so there are imperial kind of influences from that time because of the controversies that the Eastern Orthodox had. So, for example, iconoclasm, that was something that the Eastern Orthodox had to deal with. The Oriental Orthodox didn't have to deal with it because we didn't have iconoclasts at all. So, because we didn't have iconoclasts, the emphasis of icons didn't need to be there. Like, there was no reaction because there was no problem to it.
Right.
So if you don't have to address Arius, you don't need a Council of Nicaea kind of thing, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So you would see a less developed tradition of iconography in Oriental Orthodoxy because they didn't have to deal with iconoclasts.
I see.
Now, so you'll find that some parishes are attracted, though, to the more developed iconographic tradition, just regarding aesthetics. So then now it becomes a parish preference. So is that an influence? What if a parish has iconostasis? In Oriental Orthodoxy, we don't really have those. So we have the curtain, right?
Right.
So this becomes more of a preference that is an influence, but based on aesthetics, really. Things like this, like for me, until now, I have not seen a more beautiful church aesthetically than St. George Serbian Orthodox Church in San Diego. It's gorgeous. The iconography in there is all mosaics. It's the most beautiful church I ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah. We used to use that building before we got our own. The Syriac Orthodox were using the Serbian building for many years. So my point is, so there are these like influences kind of back and forth. You can't help. I would say even the canonization of Augustine by the Copts is a Western influence. That's not native. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I was about to ask that, so I'm glad that you answered that one. I just think it's a very interesting topic for me because last couple years, maybe last year and a half, I've been really getting into the impact of like Hellenic philosophy on Eastern Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and now I'm starting to learn a little bit more on the Oriental side. So I always thought it was fascinating, like what we talked about earlier, the Syriacs and the Latins being similar. So is there any view at all in the Oriental Church that, like, is there a aversion to Greek philosophy, like to Plato, Aristotle, even later with Plotinus? Is there some kind of caution toward this kind of theological philosophy?
So yeah, I would say so. I would say that the ethos from which that tradition is established and the way that that thought is kind of expressed and presented is not our ethos. Um, for the Orthodox mind who is reading Ephraim, who's reading Jacob, who's reading Aphrahat or Philoxenos, Severus, whoever, if you are incorporating the ones you mentioned into that, then then your framework and your kind of blueprint, it becomes sickly.
Yeah.
It becomes some kind of it becomes impure. So this is not our language. This is not the way we think, and it becomes polluted when you talk to us about our saints with that lens or that kind of influence or whatever. Then it's not the same. You kind of add it. You put in some other stuff that is foreign to our mother's food.
Exactly. Yeah, I find this to be a very important and very large topic. I recently published my first book, and there's a few chapters in that book where I deal with this topic extensively, and I show the difference between what people think might be Christian theology, but actually it's Hellenism, and then what the real Christian theology is. And so you see a sentiment, and even some of the earliest fathers who say, Plato may have been given wisdom, but anybody who actually teaches Platonism, you're not even a Christian. So I find that to be kind of a controversial topic because, there's this weird fringe belief in Eastern Orthodoxy, which I don't think the vast majority hold to it, but they say that in the herring of Hades that Christ went and redeemed Plato and had a conversation with him. I think that's total lunacy. I don't believe in that at all. But people on social media will say, Jesus talked to Plato. I'm like, I don't know. I don't really see a citation for that, and it just sounds like, oh, now we have the excuse to incorporate whatever we want from Platonism, even though Hellenism is a declared heresy, even in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So I just find that topic to be kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught this. There was a debate or a discussion, not a debate, a discussion between Adam Fanatic, Coptic Fanatic. I don't know.
Yeah, I
know. And Astro, who's a Thomist, I think.
Oh.
And it was pretty recent, maybe like a month or so ago. And it was kind of about this topic, like kind of Thomism and all those guys, and then the way that we think. And I think that whoever is interested in this conversation, please go watch that debate or discussion because it really shows the difference in the ethos between the two sides.
Yeah, I think the word you're using there, the ethos, is definitely the proper word because a combination of everything. It's not just councils and theology. It's spirit, spirituality, how you read the Bible itself. With what you know already going into it can change how you're going to read the scripture. So it's extremely important.
Yeah.
All right. So unless there's another topic you want to bring up on that strain, I did want to kind of open the floor to see if anybody had any questions. All right, guys. I'm putting the StreamYard link into the comments. I'll pin it as well. And that way, anybody who wants to come in, here it is. Feel free. We'll add you onto the video and or sound. Be polite, and the rule is no monologuing, so don't talk for 10 minutes straight. But any question you have related to Oriental Orthodoxy, and then maybe Oriental Orthodoxy's relation to the other churches, feel free to come in. And yeah. So at the moment, I think this has been a pretty good discussion. I wanted to ask you before we have people chime in and join, what has been your favorite interaction with, as you would say, Chalcedonians, the Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, etc.? Because you've been involved in quite a few discussions and debates on the YouTube scene.
You're asking me interactions in what kind of context?
Like kind of just who's your favorite YouTube theology personality that's not Oriental Orthodox?
Okay, well, I don't know if you know, like there's kind of an old school team that we used to be before I knew anybody. Before I kind of was out there, it was Elijah Yassi and his brother Fawaz. They're both Syriac Catholic / Chaldean Catholic. And Eric Ibarra, William Albrecht. This was kind of the OG group that I was with. I was like the token Orthodox guy. And we did a chill stream recently. I put it back up on my channel too, but those guys are like family to me. I've always there was another guy with us actually, but he's not active online. He was the Eastern Orthodox one, Peter Gummo. He's a subdeacon in the Antiochian Orthodox Church. He'll be on my channel soon. You guys will see him. If you guys don't remember who that is, you guys will see him soon.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
Another question I had for you: what kind of projects are you working on your channel? Because I know you did like a defense of Oriental Orthodoxy part. What is it, 1 through 8? What kind of other projects do you have coming up on your channel?
So today actually at 5:00 Pacific, I have Deacon Enoch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church will be on, and next Wednesday, I'm announcing it. Next Wednesday at also 5 p.m. Pacific, I'm going to have the other Paul on. He's going to be the first Protestant I ever bring on. Maybe the only one. I don't know.
Maybe the only one. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been on here a few times. He's a good pal. So I think
actually, no. Redeemed Zoomer was on, so he was the first Protestant. I forgot.
Yeah, that's right. You did have that discussion with Redeemed Zoomer. I thought that was fascinating. Zoomer on Twitter later said that Saint Cyril might have been a Miaphysite after his discussion with you. I thought that was.
It seems like he's solidified in that position.
Yeah, it's quite an admittance from his part, but I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, why wouldn't he just become Oriental Orthodox then if that's what his position is? But in any event, what do you think of the growth of YouTube and other social media theology in general?
Sorry, before I answer that question, just so I wanted to add somebody else to the list of close friends of mine.
Okay.
The Chalcedonians, because I don't want to offend anybody, and I remembered him. Craig Trulia, who everybody knows.
Oh, of course.
I do shows with. Okay, what was your question? Sorry about that.
What do you think of online theology? Obviously, there's some negative components to it. Do you think it's a net general good?
Nobody should say a word about theology. If you are in a Catholic, if you're in the Communion of Rome, Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Church of the East, if you're in any of these churches, you shouldn't say a word online about theology unless you have the permission and blessing of your priest or your hierarch. You shouldn't even, this shouldn't be available time for you.
Exactly.
We're not Protestants kind of willy-nilly doing whatever we want to do.
I feel like a lot of people act like Protestants, even amongst the Orthodox Catholics. Some people act like that online with, well, here's my reading of this, therefore you're debunked. It's a very strange mentality that doesn't seem apostolic to see on Twitter.
Yeah. It's, that's why I told you guys yesterday on the stream how I called the Buffalo's priest. And then it became real. It became like, okay, there's now something that connects me to him. Like we became real people. I actually, like, before that happened, it was just like kind of this anonymous, no name, this dehumanizing thing. Right. Then when it becomes real like that, it connects me to the guy. Now I feel, okay, there's some kind of, if you want to call it friendship, I don't know what you want to call it, but now there is a concern for him as a person. I do now care about him because I talked to his priest. So then this is the difference of it being in the canonical boundaries of the Church of God or not. Am I talking to this person as a real person, or is he just nothing, a random nobody? So this is why to have permission from our priests and bishops should be mandatory. It's not optional.
I definitely agree with that. We have somebody who would like to join, and I believe they have a question for you. Algebra, you are now in the chat. And again, the StreamYard link is right here for anybody who wants to queue up and ask some questions. You're on mute at the moment.
Yes, so my understanding of the Chalcedonian definition is that the hypostatic union is inseparable and indivisible. So I just wanted to know how can we approach that in terms of the genetic components of Jesus' DNA? like my thinking is he has to have a Y chromosome. So maybe you can give some thoughts on that.
From which side? The Chalcedonian side?
I guess from both Chalcedonian and Maya-physicism, I think getting an understanding of how his DNA components would be perhaps would unify the two in terms of like Jesus has to be a full human being. All of us started out as DNA activated by our mother's transcriptomes and everything. And so like how does that translate into the incarnation or the hypostatic union in general?
I would say he had DNA like everybody else would have DNA, and he had a Y chromosome. He was a male. I don't see, unless I'm not understanding the question, I don't see the problem with believing that there is a hypostatic union and his DNA is kept, like the integrity of his DNA is kept. I don't see the problem on either.
Right.
Either side.
I would
Yeah.
add, I mean, we know that Jesus Christ had a body. He had teeth and skin. So how I could say the same thing, like, oh, how could he possibly have skin and teeth if there's a hypostatic union?
Yeah,
Unless I'm misunderstanding the question here.
right. I think all of the traditions say that he took his flesh from his mother, so he had his mother's DNA. Right.
And
I know. And
That's the part I was trying to figure out because so scientifically speaking, how would he get the Y chromosome? So like that's from a Catholic discussion because you have three options of like 0%, 100%, and 50%, and I think 50% of Mary, and it would have to be somewhere else, but we still have to figure out because he's a man, how.
I think I understand. I think I understand what you're asking. We all admit that the humanity of Christ comes from Mary. It doesn't come from Joseph, and it's not as if God the Father is a human being, obviously. So the humanity, the human beingness, is going to be coming from the virgin birth. If that's your question.
Yeah, and are you trying to say like for him to have a Y chromosome, how could he have a Y chromosome if he doesn't have a human dad? Is that what you're asking?
I think that's what it means.
Okay, well, God can do whatever he wants, right? So,
I mean, yeah. If here algebra, not to be offensive, but essentially, I agree with Daniel's comment here. It makes sense. This is from a Latin Catholic discussion because we don't need to do like Deuteronomy 29:29 says, the things that are revealed to us belong to us and to our sons, but the secret things belong to the Lord our God. We don't have to know everything. And I feel like a lot of Catholics and then Protestants inherited this too. They must define and know everything. For the East, we're comfortable not knowing everything. And it's not an admittance of, oh, we can't answer it. Just there's certain things God didn't tell us. If he wanted us to know about DNA, he would have written it in the New Testament. That's kind of it.
it's not just that we're comfortable, it's that we advocate not knowing everything. Well, this is again back to the word ethos. This is part of our ethos, is that we don't pretend that we can even know everything, and we should be okay to not know anything but what has been revealed to us. Saint Ephraim and Saint Chrysostom too. Saint Ephraim, he says, we don't investigate into what was not revealed. We only investigate into what was revealed. And for us to even talk about God, for us to even talk about these things, he put on words to allow us to talk about him. Otherwise, we can't even talk about him. There's no way that we can talk about him. And the reason why Saint Ephraim uses poetry to do so is because poetry doesn't aim to define, because he knows, Saint Ephraim, that he can't define what is indefinable. And for him, using an example, let's say of Arianism, Saint Ephraim, for him, Arianism was a double blasphemy, because not only does it try to define what is indefinable, but it also then it puts the sun on the created side of the timeline instead of the uncreated. But also it investigates into something that is out of reach of our limited mind, cannot understand the unlimited.
Does that make sense?
Okay, I think yes, I think you answered the question, my question, because you said all traditions say that he derived his humanity from Mary, and so that's already something that's unifying across all traditions. All right, thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, yeah, I mean that was interesting. I think I'm glad he has that question because it
Me
showed
too.
us the difference between the Eastern and the Latin
Mm-hmm.
concept of ethos, as you said. Very great example. I couldn't have prepared that to be a better example, actually. Hello, welcome to the stream. Good to see you.
How's it going?
Going good.
Hi, it's good to hear. Good to see you, Jeeb and Daniel. Always a pleasure. I have some odd questions, which, of course, I'm going to try to go in order. One of the ones that I asked, and maybe you can give a better answer than the chat, is I guess one of the things that concerns me is I'm trying to understand, like, I understand in the 20th and 21st centuries how one kind of sees Oriental Orthodoxy as a united body. What I don't see is, and maybe you can fill me in on this, I just heard in the chat about the Council of Manzikert, which apparently was between the Jacobites and the Armenians. It had nothing to do with, I don't think it had anything to do with the Copts because there wasn't any information on that.
You're right. Yeah.
And so, were there any later expressions past, say, for example, 726, of an external unity between the different Miaphysite groupings,
Yes.
churches, etc.? Like, in other words, like, for example, like, you can point to pan-Orthodox synods, you can point to, events where, for example, delegations were in Moscow among the Eastern Orthodox communion. But it seems strange, like, it's a lot more scattered. Now, granted, I accept that, obviously, Islam had a lot to do with that. Many of these regions were completely and totally dominated by Islam. But even among places among the Eastern Orthodox where they were dominated by Islam, there were still abilities to send delegations. And I'm curious as to whether we see anything like that historically in the Oriental Orthodox communion.
Yeah, thank you. Deacon Sweden, right?
Father Sweden.
Father,
Yeah,
Father.
I was
Oh,
ordained. I was ordained in August. So
amazing. Okay, congratulations.
yeah, for me too. So
Yeah. Father Sweden. So we have after Manzikert, I think you said after Manzikert and before the 20th century, right?
Right. Yeah, because the 20th century we got into ecumenism. There's all sorts of everything going over.
So in between that time, there are a lot of, every time, let's say, a new patriarch is installed, they write a confession of faith to the other patriarchs. They commemorate each other in the liturgy by name each century. So we have this. Each upon each installation, we have even controversies between them. One time, this is in the early second millennium, the issue of leavened bread in the Armenian church. So the Syriac patriarch would write to them, and the Coptic patriarch would get involved. Why are you guys using this? We don't use this, etc. So the communication is there, communion is there, commemoration in the liturgy is there, notifying whenever there's a new patriarch to be installed. This is the new patriarch now. So all of these, there's records for them, century after century. The question of
was the leavened bread ever solved?
The Armenians still use it. It was solved in the Coptic church when the Syriac patriarch addressed both of them. The Coptic church returned to using leavened bread. The Armenian church continues to use unleavened bread.
Okay. All right. So that was one of my questions. And I get that. That's that one, it could be argued whether that's diplomatic or not, but that's fine. I did have a kind of a odd question here, and that was basically, if you are do the Christian groups in Syria actively evangelize Muslims? I mean, or are they just too terrified to convert them?
So in Egypt,
One moment.
Okay.
I was wondering where that was coming from.
Hmm.
We have a couple other people in queue, guys. I'll add you after this discussion here. I don't want to have 7 people talking at once. So please stay in the queue. Coptic Orthodox here says the point you're missing is what is a council for? If there's no reason for a council, why have a council?
Yeah.
Okay, but now that which okay, I don't know. Did you guys answer my question on that one?
No,
Okay.
I was waiting for.
There was a I got a phone call. There was a concern, like I guess somebody had asked me, like, are there active attempts to evangelize Muslims in Syria, for example, or are they just too terrified to convert them? Will that get you like killed? I mean, what's the situation there?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go ahead and answer that. Before I answer that, Father, someone just texted me about the relations question that you had earlier, and they said there are places that we all are also, just such as Jerusalem, where all of us are present and interact. So there's Armenians, Copts, Syriacs, whatever.
Okay.
And also the Syriac Orthodox have a monastery in Egypt, and so that preserves kind of the relationship. But anyway, back to your question about the conversion of Muslims. So in Egypt, it happens all the time, underground, obviously, but it happens in big numbers in Egypt. Like the baptisms are happening at night, or happening in places that people don't know about, things like this. In Syria, Iraq, Lebanon is very rare. Lebanon, it could be happening for marriage purposes. Syria, Iraq, very rare. The Gulf, it's happening a lot in the Arab Gulf with the Syriac church, also underground. So Pakistan, the missions in Pakistan, it's happening there. Those are probably the biggest areas. Yeah.
Okay, and so now I'm gonna ask I hate to say it's my worst question because I have asked this, I've put this before. I'm still trying to get a concrete answer. And so basically what I'm getting another call. Give me a second.
Sure. No problem.
Again, to the other guys in the queue, please be patient and we will add you in. We've got a good amount of time left, and we're going to let everyone ask some questions. So hope everyone's enjoying the stream so far. Daniel, again, I really appreciate you being here and taking time out of your schedule to have this discussion with me here.
Don, man, thank you for having me, bro. I appreciate it.
For Egypt, we also have missionaries in Asia and Africa.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Indonesia too, for missions there for us.
That's interesting about the Gulf as well. I've heard quite a few stories of just kind of under the ground, under the radar conversion happening there. What do you think the future for that is in the Gulf in particular?
I'm optimistic about the Gulf. I think whenever you have a conservative monarchy, you're already off to a good start. So they're a conservative monarchy. They're all conservative monarchies there. And when you have leisure time to be able to read and research and look into these types of things, it opens your mind to look into the light of Christianity.
Right. There's no war or need for political sectarianism there, so they're pretty much neutral, if anything.
Right, exactly.
So Father Suedon will come back. I'm going to add in the order they have come to the queue. All-man Spider, average Coptic male. Welcome to the discussion.
Yo, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. I just wanted to start off, obviously, really appreciate everything Daniel does. We've been, pretty much running him like a horse these past couple of weeks with like all the Sam streams and all that. Also want to say, Jeem, I really appreciate some of your videos. They're really like eye-opening because, personally, for me especially, like there's a lot of Christians, like even in like especially in America, they'll be like, oh, like, you know, you're supposed to be pacifistic. Like I grew up with that, right? And like, you know, you're not supposed to, like, you know, hate others, and they didn't really get it, right? But like, you know, your videos really are eye-opening on that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I do that stuff is not because I want people to be hateful or violent, obviously, but there is a middle ground where you're not supposed to tolerate people who hate God and blaspheme against God. I mean, you
For
can
sure.
be careful and be like, hey, come learn about our faith, but you start doing stuff that's irredeemably awful, it's not my responsibility for your salvation at that point anymore. So,
For
I mean,
sure.
the East understands that really well, but it's unavoidable, even for Easterners who come to the West, that Western humanism, universal humanism, can be really enticing and corrupting. So that is something I talk about. I'd very much appreciate that. Do you have any questions you want to give to Daniel or I, by the way?
Yeah. So essentially, I one quick question, two quick questions for you actually. First one is like, where this might be a little bit of long, but like where do you usually like to point to when someone asks you like, oh, Jesus said like love everyone, right? Basically, like when you argue with someone about that sort of polemic, like, oh, like, you know, you're not supposed to like say this and this, and you're not supposed to like hate this and this, like, where do you usually like to point to? You don't have to give me the full thing, obviously, since, you know, you guys are already long in here, but yeah.
Well, I assume that's my question.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I just give you a couple pointers from Scripture, number one, we're not Marcionites, so we have to accept the Old Testament. When Jesus says love your enemies, a lot of people think he's like inventing something out of thin air that's not from the Torah, but it is. Exodus 23 verse 4, Moses says, or God tells Moses the exact same thing, and then Solomon says the same thing in the Proverbs. But Moses, he learns to love your enemy, but he's still commanded to fight the pagans. And so that kind of middle ground is where God will sometimes be against something, but he still tells us to be civil people. And then I would also say, if you just read the gospel in an unbiased way, you'll see that Jesus is not really as nice as people make him out to be. And that's fine, of course, because he's the image of the Father. And we know that God is not going to be nice to everything, because you can't be loving if you don't hate evil. And I think that's the best answer right there. But there's a lot of examples. I mean, in Revelation chapter 2, the Son says that he's going to kill the followers of Jezebel with plagues and death. So if he has to take the loving the enemy thing seriously to himself, he would be acting hypocritical because he's not loving those people. But that's clearly not what he meant in the gospel. So all in all, we do have to be civil. We don't just violently attack people. And for Muslims, for example, we want them to be receptive to the gospel. But that doesn't mean enticing people and allowing them to blaspheme and insult to the point where now they've made themselves enemies of God. So that's the middle ground, as I would explain it.
For sure. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. My second like quick one, or maybe not so quick, would be like, you know, you in this discussion, right? You're starting to get to know more about Oriental Orthodoxy. What would you say is your biggest, and you know, you don't have to get too controversial, but like, what is your biggest sort of like gripe with it? Like, what would stop you from potentially like looking at it as a possible source of not so conversion, but like maybe like, you know, maybe looking, oh, maybe you guys are, you know, a little bit more right when it comes to Cyril or the early councils?
Well, I'm not trying to skate by the question here, but I genuinely need to brush up more on the
Right.
councils. And so once I'm a master of that, if I see, hey, this doesn't line up with Oriental Orthodoxy, that would be
For sure.
my problem. But
For
until
sure.
then, I can't make sweeping declarations until I've mastered the councils and the fathers. So that's my answer.
For sure. No, yeah, that's a better answer than most Chalcedonians will give us. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Spider, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to you can stay in the chat, but I'm going to add the next person in.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you.
Orthoholics mixtape. Weren't you on my Discord? Welcome.
I was actually, yeah, for a while. What happened to that Discord, by the way?
I don't like Discord. That's my
okay.
Okay. So
fair enough. It's been going good. A little history on me, since I don't think you and I have ever talked before, Daniel, but I'm coming out of like the Coptic Church. I was a convert to the Coptic Church, and I'm now a catechumen in the Eastern Orthodox Church. And I was just wondering, I don't know if it's like this for the Syriac Church, but it always very much confused me, like the Catholic Church relationship with the Coptic Church, and is that necessarily kind of, does it go both ways for the Syriac Church?
What part of the relationship do you mean?
It just seemed kind of like there was like a sort of submitting to the Pope when it came to Pope Tawados and everything that like he was able to do. Like he would basically need to, how I understand it, like ask for like Francis' permission to like build a building, or just like needed like Catholic funding. So does it go this kind of way for the Syriacs as well?
I don't think that's true.
Oh,
Right? Yeah.
okay.
Let me make one comment on that. There is a big difference between theological authority and then political alliances. As you know, even though Egypt has some wealthy people who contribute to church, it's not a wealthy country. So people seeking some kind of political allegiance doesn't always necessarily mean there's a theological undertone to that. Just thought I'd add that in.
Yeah, I know that the Catholics donated a church to the Copts in Italy, but that's the only thing. Like, if you're in Egypt, you're in America, you're in where else? There's no such relationship in Italy because it's their country. They gave us a building. We gave a building to the Russians in Egypt. Does that mean that Patriarch Kirill submits to Pope Tawadros?
Okay, I see.
Yeah. Is that Gandalf, by the way?
It's not, but I yeah, essentially. Let's just say it is.
Okay, yeah, I'm a big Tolkien fan.
Tight.
I'm gonna Orthoholics, you can ask another question. I'm just gonna add Christian Mario into the video stream because he's been waiting a little. But if you have another question,
I'm not sure. I mean, just like what do both of you guys think would be like the realist, kind of more realistic way of an actual, just even like talking of like some sort of communion or recommuning again?
There's different proposals of approaches. Like there's, again, Metropolitan Hilarion, like I said earlier, where it's kind of a more ecumenistic approach. I think I think the true approach is repentance. I think both sides would say that. Both sides would say either we have to repent or you guys have to repent. One of us is wrong. That's the true way to go about this.
I agree.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you would like to add to that, G, more?
No, I think he's 100% correct. We have to be honest, and we can't, like in the 90s, people were saying, oh, we mean the same thing, but we're mixing up the Greek. It wasn't the case. So one side has to be wrong. We can't do what Eastern Catholics have done, where you can be Byzantine, Severian, as you could say, Oriental, and Nestorian at the same time. It doesn't make any historical sense. So somebody has to be incorrect.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're like, guys, I'm an Arian, Karaite, Muslim, Mormon. Like that's not a religion. So we have to believe in something, obviously.
Right.
All right. Christian Mario, Orthoholics, you can stay in if you'd like. Christian Mario,
I would like to.
first time talking face to face. How's it going?
Yeah, how's it going, Gene?
It's good. Welcome to the channel. I'm glad you're here.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
I had a couple questions, but they weren't like particularly profound questions, just kind of dumb questions, to be honest. But one of them was, in the Oriental Orthodox Church, are there any views about the Holy Fire in Jerusalem? Like, is that a tradition for you guys as well, or not?
Okay, so there's like, and this is historical in the church. You see it where there's like local lore, if you will, whereas like you'll have like local venerations or local kind of things to where they kind of like a particular thing like this. So you'll see like in Palestine, like I think all the Christian groups kind of, they want to believe it. Historically, like canonically, traditions, you have one mention Saint Jacob Barsalibi, he says, 1 year our Pascha and your Pascha didn't line up for some reason. I don't know why the math was different. And when it didn't line up, the fire came down on our year, and then it really upset you guys. So this is like the only mention of it. But according to our tradition, in a canonical sense, no, we don't. It's not. It's not mandatory for us to believe. I would say the majority of the hierarchy probably don't. The lay people probably do, because they live there. But yeah, I don't think it's like you're not going to get a very consistent answer. Really, there's no official thing about it.
Yeah, I didn't think there would be like an official, because I don't even think, like, I know that the patriarch has done it for like over 1,000 years, but I don't even think it's like dogma in the Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church either. So as far as I'm aware, I mean, Gene, you can correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't think you dogmatically have to believe in it, but it is an element of EO tradition, as we can say.
Yeah, like it's like a pious tradition, you know. Another question was going to be for Daniel was just Oriental Orthodox contemporary saints, because I'm familiar with some of your theologians of antiquity, but I don't really know. Besides, I think those recent martyrs that were in Egypt, I think 2013 or so. But are there any other like mystics or big contemporary saints that are really big in the Oriental Orthodox world that I should be aware of?
Yeah, so we have a lot in the Coptic Church, like Pope Kyrillos VI, Deacon Habib Girgis. These are mystics who are canonized in the 20th century. And then there's Patriarch Elias of the Syriac Church, also 20th century canonization. The Armenians have a lot, I know that, and the Ethiopians. I mean, I can get you a list if you want. I'll send it to you on Twitter.
Sure, I appreciate that. Also, have you ever heard of Bob Marley converting to Ethiopian Orthodoxy at the end of his life?
He did.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was legit or not, but I heard about that, and I was like, that's big and true.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, Nipsey Hussle was
all
born.
I have to say. So,
yeah, Nipsey Hussle was born into it. There was a famous.
Really?
Yeah. What's his Weekend also born into it.
Oh, it's sad they didn't stick with it. But,
yeah. And then there was a famous lady. I forgot who it is. She converted into Ethiopian Orthodox too. I forgot who she was recently. But yeah. Are you related to Christian Luigi on Twitter too?
No, actually, he had his own branding as Luigi before we even met. But one of my best friends in real life is a Roman Catholic guy, and that's his brother-in-law. So I met him before he started.
World! Wow, amazing.
But yeah, now he's all over the internet, and everyone thinks that that we must be associated because of that. But no, we're actually just associated because one of my best friends is his brother-in-law. So that's how I know him.
Yeah, nice, awesome.
So, well, great talking with you guys. I'm gonna go head out. I'm gonna get back to work. So you guys have a great rest of your day.
You too.
You too, Christian Mario. Great to have you on. See you, hopefully soon.
Yes, sir.
All right. We have Duke Athos. Hello, Duke. You're on the Fraser Crane show. What advice do you need?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Daniel Kakish, I would like to thank you for the hard work you've been doing. Like, we love you. Inta ala rasi. But my question is for Jean. I wanted to ask you about which is the strongest tradition in Islam to defend. So, like, is it the Sunni or the Shia?
Okay, all right, so you're asking if I were a Muslim, what's the best position for me to have against a Christian?
Yes, exactly.
That's an interesting one. I mean, it really just depends, because within Sunni and Shia, there's so many different things. If I were to entertain the Shia path, for example, I would think it would make more sense metaphysically and philosophically to defend it as an Ismaili Shia, personally. But on the Sunni side, that's where you have kind of a mess, because you have all different manner of philosophies. You have the Atharis, the Asharis, Maturidi, etc., etc. You have the resurgence of neo-Salafism online. So if I had to give an answer, I would say not the neo-Salafis, but maybe a traditional Sunni a normal Sunni who's kind of historically literate would probably be able to give a Christian a good run for their money if they were well read on history. But I still see the issue of the pre-existent eternal Quran being a problem when trying to debate the Trinity, because they don't really have an easy way out when their book is exactly what we're saying about the Son, uncaused, or they say it's uncaused, eternal, pre-existent, God, but not God. It's just very complicated, whereas the Shia don't really have that kind of a problem, but then again, their metaphysics are a little wacky. So sorry if that's not a concrete answer. I don't think any of them
No.
have the default.
Yeah, I agree with you with the Ismaili point.
What do you think, Jim, about the Zaydis? Then?
I know very little about their theology. I just know, Houthi memes online. I really need to brush up a little more on their theology, because I know that there's a major difference between them and the normal 12 or Shia, but I don't know what these differences are.
I think they don't have the wackiness. I also have a very, very not based on anything hypothesis kind of from the air that they might be some kind of vestige of the old Christian community of Najran.
Really? What makes you think that?
Because they're still there and they're very particular to only that area, and no other area is Zaydi like that,
That's
right?
true. Yeah, that's true.
And it's like it's a very political view of Islam, as from what I know. It's not like they don't have the infallibility of the typical Shia stuff. They don't have the innovations of that, and they also don't have the hijacking of the state by Abu Sufyan's family, the Umayyin. So they kind of recognize that Ali is the successor, and at the same time, they don't believe in all the infallibility stuff.
That's very interesting. I really, again, don't know much about their theology, but I do know that they're greatly divorced from the Twelvers and obviously the Ismailis. They don't have this divine imamate that you mentioned. But, Duke Athos, I think it depends on who they're debating. Like, as someone said in the comment section, the Sunnis have not done really well against someone like Jay Dyer, just simply has nothing to do with scripture. Their metaphysics don't make any sense in competing with Christian metaphysics, is essentially the problem. It's like they're saying, you can't have the Trinity, you can't have this, you can't have that. But then they run into much worse problems. So that's why it's not a debate with some of these people. And even in my review of Jay Dyer versus Jake the Muslim metaphysician, I brought that up because Jake's appeal to these tangible hands of God was not, he didn't go all the way, because he said they're hands, but they're not hands. So it's essentially materialism, but also transcendentalism. And it's just a wacky metaphysical middle ground that I don't see as working, at least if you're some kind of a neo-Salafi. So that's my answer for that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But a follow-up question for Daniel Kakish. Will we get contra Muslim streams anytime soon?
I think on William's channel we will have another one with Dr. Gabriel. We did one before with Dr. Gabriel Reynolds. We might do another one with William Albrecht with Dr. Gabriel Reynolds again. I did a few with him with Father Deacon Dragani, but the ones with Dr. Gabriel Reynolds, those are a very big deal, because you're getting the view of like a real, like all of us talking together, me or Father Deacon or William, like we're telling you what we read, but Dr. Gabriel, he's like, this is his expertise, this is what he does, like this is his profession, so those are always different.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, guys. God bless you both.
Thank you.
You as well. Thanks for coming on.
God bless.
So we're probably going to close out the stream in a little. If anyone else wants to hop on, now would be your chance. Luca says, Gene, what do you think of Alawites? I would say the Alawites are an example of a real kind of ethno-religious group that really, they don't evangelize. I don't even know if it's part of their tradition. They have a bunch of beliefs that were clearly just strange folklore and Gnostic heresy from the Levant. And one thing that's interesting is that people always say that, Christianity has to be more tolerant, but wherever Christianity was, heresies were eliminated. Whereas in the Islamic world for a long time, all kinds of strange beliefs appeared, especially in the Levant, like you have the Druze, the Alawites, and all these weird mixed groups in Mesopotamia. And I'm not going to say Islam created them, but it was an environment where they were able to mix these kind of strange beliefs. The Alawites today are very Sunnified. So they're not really a religious theological threat. It's more just a political ethno-religious thing. Like, yeah, exactly, like the Mandaeans. I don't believe that there's any, they don't debate people on the internet, if put it that way. They don't have an interest in that.
Right. I don't even think they accept converts. From what I know, we have a lot of them in the community here, a lot of Mandaeans. So as far as I know, they don't accept converts, and a lot of them convert into Christianity to marry. So they would get baptized, and just they're kind of dwindling. The Mandaean community is dwindling because it doesn't seem like anybody converts to them or they accept converts, and because they're leaving themselves to be like nobody becomes Mandaean to get married. Like a Christian girl, if wants to marry a Mandaean guy, he'll get baptized.
I see.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a lot of these weird, like archaic groups that still exist in the Middle East. If you know where to look, you'll find these small populations, and 200 years ago they might have had much larger ones, and you don't really find that in Europe or any of the Christian majority areas historically, where these like fringe groups still existed, at least not for long. But the Mandaeans are a great example of this weird phenomena. And if someone asked about the Yazidis, somebody said the Yazidis were originally Nestorian. What do you think of that, Daniel?
I don't know. I know that in the time of Saint Ephrem, there were so many random sects of these kind of mixing of this Indo-Aryan, Persian, Mesopotamian religions, like Manichaeanism or Bardasian and his heresy.
Yeah.
So the Mandaeans are a kind of a spawn of this. They're a Gnostic spawn of kind of this Manichaeanism and Bardasian and this kind of thing, and it comes out. The Yazidis probably have a lot in common with the old Mazda, Zoroastrian kind of Persian stuff, plus some Islamic influence a little bit here or there. I don't know if they were Nestorian. I think they were more of a proper Iranian tradition, religion.
I see. So like kind of like you said, the Indo-Iranic type.
Exactly.
I'm asking a friend of mine if he would like to join, but otherwise I think so far we've had a really successful stream here. We have one last question on Oriental theology from Jason Murray. Can Oriental Orthodox affirm two modes of willing in Christ, that Christ wills in a human way and a divine way at the same time without conflict?
We believe he has one will from two wills, just like corresponding to his one nature from the two natures.
Oh, okay. So it's exactly like the nature. Like there's still the divine and the man elements, you could say, but it's only one nature, not two after the union.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that was a good answer there. And it looks like we have now run dry on the people coming in. So I'll give you guys another 2 minutes to do that. But if not, again, I'd like to say thank you for taking time out of your busy day for this amazing stream. I think we had tons of awesome topics, and I can't wait to collaborate again in the future.
Yeah, thank you for having me again, Jim. Keep in touch, huh?
Definitely will. And I'll be looking out tonight. You said 5 p.m. Pacific, you have a project coming out on your channel.
Yeah, Lion's Den. There's the tag right on the screen at my name. With Deacon Henoch from the Ethiopian Church. Some of you guys might have seen him before. We kind of left the topic up in the air to talk about, but I want to do it on Saint Georgios of Segala in the Ethiopian Church. I kind of had mentioned on a previous show that I have like a 3 pillars of orthodoxy, but for the Oriental side kind of thing. It's not official. It's just like a thing I said.
Okay.
Of Saint Georgios from the Ethiopian tradition, Gregory of Tatev from the Armenians, and Saint Severus. So I hope that maybe we'll get in a lot of info on Saint Georgios today with Deacon Henoch.
Perfect. All right. Well, everybody, now Daniel's channel, so check him out if you're interested. And I hope everybody learned a good amount about Oriental Orthodoxy, history, and a few other things. Jacob Doman, we already answered that if you want to scroll back into maybe the middle part of this stream. So we're not going to re-answer the same thing. All right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to end the stream right now, and we'll see you next time. Yeah, stream's ending.